Hello YouTube, Ronan Kazi, more Division gameplay with loud volume. I got it turned down. Recently I did a video and one of the people that comments quite a bit, his name is Super Slanky Lanky, talked about infinity. And like there's different sizes of infinity and there's different types of impossible. And the kind of impossible I want to talk about is the kind of impossible I am doing the last time out. I'm doing the last mission. It's the UN mission at the General Assembly. I'm taking down General Bliss. I've sped it up a little bit, 1.5 I think. The volume's still okay, but it's a little bit fast. I played this a lot on challenging, so like I'm waiting for this stuff to hit the fan, but it never does. Old things die hard. At this point, my character's level 30, even though I haven't finished all the things. I've told you before, I like to out-level the game. So now I have a build that's just stuff I had in my... In the Division, you have a chest that all your characters, that your whole account can use. So I'm just using pieces from this and that. And they have a wild card piece called the Ninja Backpack, which is the original Ninja Backpack. So I have a build that's Technician and Nomad, so I got some healing happening all the time, and everything's rolled for skill. So my skills come back pretty fast, and I don't know what I'm doing. So we're talking about impossible. I mentioned in the last video, the Black Swan. I still need to put that in the comments of the last video, that book. But basically, the whole idea about the Black Swan is the story starts off, there's for thousands of years or hundreds of years, I think there's no black swans until there is a black swan. It was impossible till it wasn't. And then the book is about how we justify looking backwards, how we say, oh yeah, we should have known that. Yeah, it's easily predicted. But that's kind of what makes a black swan event, that you can't predict it. And I kind of stumbled back onto that again when I had this whole talk about random and not random. And there was some philosophers on the internet that talked about we didn't have free will because everything was determined. And then I spent like weeks thinking about how nothing's determined. And since I kind of gave up on that and I proved it to myself, it seems like everything I see, everything is random. Why don't I write that down? Because sometimes when I'm thinking these ideas, it's just done. It's finished. I used to work with a person that we'd have a hard problem, and I'd figure it out, and I go, it's done. It's done except for the execution. But that part, I don't need to spend any energy thinking about it. And that's what this whole, do we have free will or not? We do have free will. It's not even a question if we do or not. And a lot of this comes down defining goals, words, and a definition. We talked about some of that, but we're talking about things that are impossible. What we once thought was impossible is no longer not possible. Or it is possible, whatever I'm trying to say there. But the point, bringing Super Slanky's comment about there's different types of infinities. There's bigger infinities than other infinities. An example of that is, let's consider the set of all even numbers. That's infinite. Now consider the set of all of whole numbers, all even whole numbers. Now let's consider the set of all even and odd whole numbers. It's obviously bigger, but they're both infinite. And different things are impossible. And this goes back to goal setting, team building, everything else, right? One surefire way to be unsuccessful in life is to do impossible, set impossible things as your goals. The next thing is, another way to be unhappy in life is to not give yourself impossible goals, stretch goals. So again, I've tried to give you this idea of a bandwidth, like there's a sweet spot between the maximum impossible and the minimum impossible. And really where you're going to find the best part of life are in that middle, and not necessarily the middle, but there's a bandwidth. There's an upper limit and a lower limit, and it's kind of like in the shape of a trumpet. It starts as you go through time, it widens up, or whatever the difficulty, whatever you want to put the X and Y coordinates. But we have this capability to have goals, things we do, situations to go from impossible to possible. When you look into anything with enough granularity, you find a lot of whatever you want to make of it, you're going to find. You're going to find arguments for both sides. So you constantly have to move through these different frames at different quote unquote altitudes to kind of see where you're at. Obviously, recently in one of the videos I mentioned about is, what's the goal of parenting? It's for your kids to live. You don't want them to kill themselves, God forbid, or anything else like that. So, but do you then protect them so much that they don't live, that it pushes them to that thing where they end up doing bad things anyways? And that's kind of what the Greek tale about Oedipus is about tempting fate, or, you're fated to do something, then Oedipus's father is told by the witches that, his son's going to kill him. So he tells his wife to kill the son they just had. She, instead of killing them, sends him down to the next town. Later on, Oedipus is he's a young man. He's coming back to his town. He doesn't know it's his father's, ends up killing his father, but he doesn't know it's his father. And he sleeps with his mom, but he doesn't know it's his mom. So then he gouges his eyes out because look what fate has done to him. And so, again, over and over and over, you're going to come across these things, how you frame things, how you set up the goals, how you look at things. Is it an absolute? It's almost never absolute. It's always kind of a sliding scale. It'd be convenient to say everything's a sliding scale, but it's not. And so philosophy, thinking, morals, all these things are hard. Paradoxes are given not because they're solvable, but they make you think about it, and hopefully you think about both sides. I think there's a lot of value in thinking on both sides of things. There's some troubleshooting things, obviously, in everything. Solomon did what with the baby? Split it in half. Then he found out who the mother is. So in general, you could always go 50-50 on any situation. If it's possible, go 50-50. That might be a solution. You could Pareto something, the top 3 things. You could then say, well, here's the top 3 things. You could do, people do SWOT charts. But things are only impossible until they're not impossible. The theory of relativity is not the law of relativity, it's the theory of relativity. I was listening to a podcast today with Lex Friedman talking with some star nerd, someone that's into stars. And think how many stars there are. There's more stars than there are grains of sands. Yet, these people make proclamations for the whole universe. What if what we see is only local to our planet? What if you can move faster than the speed of light? We don't know these things. We only know in our area. And when you really start thinking about all these arguments, people, I almost get smoked right here. I have a skill that goes off when I get shot here that saves my life, or it already went off to save my life. It was moving so fast, internet. What I'm trying to say with this impossible thing, and scientists and pseudoscientists like psychiatrists, not saying it's pseudoscience, but it's not there's nothing to prove. There's no specific thing in we can't think in people's heads. You don't know what I'm thinking. I don't know what you're thinking. We have guessed. You might have had a certain type of childhood, but that doesn't mean that you're concrete like that. If it were, you wouldn't have free will. So I could just turn and predict all of your things if I had that's the whole premise of determinism, that with all the prerequisites, I could predict what the future is going to be. But you can't. And the world's probably probabilities. If you look at quantum mechanics, it's based on probabilities. Not every particle is quantum tunneling, and only quantum tunnels when it needs it. Have you ever thought about that the sun's made of a whole bunch of photons and electrons and whatever it's made of? And how does one of those get out of the sun? It gets out of the sun, it escapes through quantum tunneling. And that's based on some type of probability where it goes through a barrier that it shouldn't, but probability says a little bit if it's going to. Go see other physics things, quantum mechanics, for more detailed explanations. Please like, share, comment. Hit the notifications. Can I take down this helicopter without turning on the lasers? I don't like running around. One of the things in these 3 bars in the division that you're going to see is Those 3 bars, normally you can't, once you get below one of them, you can't get past it. But the type of armor I have, it'll automatically get past. So it greatly increases your survivability in your gameplay. As I play this more, I really appreciate it. The graphics are slightly dated. I love the New York versus Washington, D.C. I'm hoping the new Division franchises will be decent, but I have a feeling they just make them easier. People are whatever. This game was great. It still is great. The missions were great. And if you play the Division 2, you'll feel like it's more polished. It's not. It's just easier. They placated some of the things. I'm not saying this game can't be improved. It could. And that's everything with all sequels. You just want more of the same, but you don't. They have their new idea. Getting back to Impossible. So, impossibilities, some of the framing. We don't know what the future is going to be. One of the best arguments is we used to think the world was flat. We used to think we'd go off the end of it. We didn't know about molecules. We didn't know about quarks. We didn't know about upspin, downspin, all that other stuff in physics. We didn't know this, that, and everything else. So what I'm going to tell you is don't get so stuck on things being impossible. It's going to be in some framing. You've got to select the right frame. Ultimately, there's probably a thing we're missing, right? You can feel we're missing something. You've talked about goals, you've talked about framing, but there's another thing that we got to talk about still. And we're going to talk about that soon. How to make all this work. Or I'm going to die right here. This is normally when I say. I appreciate YouTube. I appreciate everyone that's viewing the videos. Thank you. Hopefully we'll grow the channel. I'm going to put more things on Steam and we'll see what happens there. Thanks, YouTube. Bye.
How about that, Agent? You just killed the CEO of the last organized threat to Manhattan. Wasn't easy, and we lost a lot of good people, but...